So we're waiting for a few people to come into the room. Maybe we can have some people Sherpa people into the room. We'll give them 2 minutes and then we'll start. Okay, so we are going to start, even though we're waiting for some people to come into the room. We have reached the last substantive panel discussion of the day before the closing session. You've all been very patient. This session is focused on financing social protection. And while it is the last session, it is certainly not the least important, as it is going to look at how states can actually underpin the right to social protection with the appropriate financial resources to make it happen. So before we begin, my name is Evelyn Astor. I work for the International Trade Union Confederation. And I will give a few remarks before passing over to our distinguished panel. First of all, to acknowledge the fact that despite the fact that social protection has been acknowledged internationally as a human right, and there are numerous international commitments to extend social protection, including the Agenda 2030, there is very little consensus at the international level on how social protection should actually be financed. And there are different reasons for this. First of all, there's a rather large diversity in the design of social protection systems and the different structures of social security contributions, of different taxation models. But international labor standards do at least refer to some general principles. And ILO recommendation 202 in particular stresses the primary and overall responsibility of the state in terms of providing and delivering social protection. This points to the need for statutory, publicly organized and financed systems. In September of last year, the ITUC, together with World Solidarity and the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, we organized a global conference on financing social protection. We brought together unions, civil society organizations, academics, international and national level policymakers. I'm very pleased that some of you in the room attended this conference. And the idea was to identify the major challenges that exist in terms of financing social protection. From demographic aging, we've heard about this in many cases, insufficient tax revenue due to inadequate taxation or high levels of tax evasion, high levels of informality. This was discussed also in the earlier panels. The changing nature of work and the fact that many employees on precarious contracts, dependent self-employed workers are actually not having access to the same contributory social security schemes that workers on so-called standard contracts are entitled to. And I think we need to acknowledge the big elephant in the room, that also some of these financing challenges come in some cases due to pressure from the international community as well, international organizations and financial institutions to cut back on social expenditures. Sometimes these even come in the case of lending conditionalities. The conference also did show some good news, and that is that there is clear evidence that financing social protection can be financially affordable in the vast majority of countries. We have ILO research that's worked on this. We also have the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Social Protection Floor Index. So as Michelle Bachelet pointed out rightly this morning, to a large degree, it's about getting priorities straight. So we discussed the various means that governments have at their disposal to overcome the financing challenges and create fiscal space. There are many ways that they can do this, including reallocating public expenditures, leveraging progressive forms of taxation, tackling tax evasion, leveraging social security contributions from workers, but also employers, and making sure also that workers take responsibility for their workers irrespective of their contract type. And of course, supporting the transition from the informal to the formal economy. We also discussed how the international community can provide some financial and technical support to states in financing. So I hope very much that this session is going to build on some of these ideas. We are going to hear very concrete country examples of how governments have created the necessary fiscal space to expand their social protection systems. We will also pay attention to the role of development partners in supporting low-income countries to address critical financing gaps. And we'll look at the role of social partners as well as civil society in the financing debate. To my left, I have Ms. Anta Sarr Diaco. She's the General Delegate for Social Protection and National Solidarity in Senegal. To my far left, We have Jürgen Oomen. He is the social protection expert for the European Commission's Directorate General for Development Cooperation. To my right, I have the pleasure to introduce Ms. Naveen El Kabach, Vice Minister for Social Solidarity in Egypt. And to my far right, we have Mr. Plamen Dimitrov, who is the president of the Confederation of Independent Trade Unions in Bulgaria, and also a member of the ILO's governing body, the Workers' Group spokesman on employment and social protection issues. So we have indeed a very diverse and distinguished panel. I will start off with Ms. Diako. Senegal has committed to extending universal health care for all as part of its commitment for universal social protection. I would like to know more from you. What is your current financing strategy to finance this extension through national sources? And I would also like to know about the support that you may be receiving from the international community.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bonsoir à tous. C'est un honneur d'abord pour moi de participer à ce panel de haut niveau. Et vous me permettrez aussi de remercier tous les organisateurs qui ont permis à l'organisation de cette conférence et qui nous y ont invités. Je vais d'abord commencer par introduction pour vous dire que le gouvernement du Sénégal a fait de la protection sociale une priorité, comme cela est inscrit dans son plan.
In the emerging Senegal plan, in the human capital, social protection, and sustainable development plan or pillar. Now, this is the 20-year program from 2015 to 2035. To this end, the General Delegation for Social Protection and National Solidarity was set up. The goal is to coordinate public policies for social protection. To this end, the DGPSN, the General Delegation, is working to set up a system for social protection which is accessible for all Senegalese. It makes available a guaranteed minimum income for all, guaranteed health care for all, and safety networks that build resilience when crises crop up. Now, this calls for sustainable funding for social protection. This is a major challenge in sub-Saharan African countries, where public expenditure on social protection is especially weak. This is the case of Chad, where 1.2% is the case, Côte d'Ivoire 1.9%, Nigeria 2.8%. This is far below the global average of 8.7%. Turning now to Senegal, the government, starting in 2012, set up a national program to provide family allocations to the tune of $5 million. At present, we have 300,000 households living in poverty. These families receive conditional cash transfers, helping them to change their healthcare, education, and civil practices. Furthermore, there are
then on the contrary, we started to move on targeted social protection. At that time, the budget was extremely limited. There was dire need in order to start with the poorest. And there we had poverty maps produced by the Statistical Bureau in the country. And we mainly focused in Upper Egypt, or at least started with it. And we have social protection strategy, debatable, because we didn't have social protection strategy in the country at that time, education, health, and food subsidy. If we look at an integrated approach towards social protection, you will find the different programs enacted. It's not only like we started the first conditional cash transfer in the country in 2014. It's the first time to have conditional cash transfer linked with education and health, especially for children. So it's extremely sensitive to children. We have health care. Now we establish a universal law for health care in the country, and it's universal coverage. We have school feeding program, and then we have food ration cards that was extremely mistargeted and left the government with poor experience with having universal targeting, and that's why they're becoming to be very sensitive towards universal targeting from the bad experience of the food ration cards, because the food ration cards actually reached around 80% of the population and 70% of the population for food products, 80% of the population for bread, which actually costed the country millions and 100 millions of Egyptian pounds that were really going not necessarily for the poor. We enacted the program on decent housing to establish water connection and sanitation connections in the villages. Also, we have insurance and social pension law, a new law that's been enacted in the country. And we have slum areas and village development program. And then also we found that employment is an intrinsic program in the country in order to create resources and to help people getting out from social protection and to graduate to economic production. So these are the set of the programs that we have. The social protection floor, and that actually ILO is helping us a lot in establishing this social protection floor in the country and having a fiscal space that would help us save resources. Actually, the first one is the healthcare for all of the population. We also have the second, which is universal social protection for all children, including health education, especially added to cash transfer to their households till the children are graduated at the age of 18. We have support to people at the working age if they are employed, so they are liable to social insurance and to maternity and to protection for people with disabilities who are employed, or if they are unemployed, having for social assistance. Then we have social pension to elderly above 65. And finally, we have targeted, maybe the ILO is focused on the above four. The fifth, we added it for the poorest, most vulnerable, like people with disabilities, single mothers, and emergency survivors, and also for the people who survived, who are getting out of the addiction, and also household of prisoners, of the families of the prisoners. So this is the social protection floor that we are creating. Maybe we're not giving all the families who have children, except by this we are using proxy means testing to reach the poorest children or the poorest households that have children. Then we have Takaful and Karama program. Takaful and Karama is solidarity and dignity. Solidarity is targeting the household and its family eligibility, targeting the household who have children, or the dignity, it's targeting, it's actually individual eligibility, targeting orphans, elderly people above 65, people with disabilities, and single mothers. Dignity is more or less, it's for life, except for the orphans when they grow up. But solidarity is actually linked every 3 years, the households are recertified. I'll run, we have full coverage of Takaful and Karama, reaching everybody. Eligibility reaches, thank you. Eligibility reaches around 41%. We had a database of 25, a poverty database in the country that reached 25 million individuals. We had everything automated and linked to the other ministries, Ministry of Health, Education, Supply, Housing, and Interior, in order to check And we built a unified national registry. We built a verification and grievance mechanism. We had capacity building of the civil servants, and we have electronic connectivity for the households. Maybe the Upper Egypt, it's 72% of the cash transfer goes to Upper Egypt because they are the poorest. Also, 88% of the population who are receiving cash transfer are, the smart cards are written under the name of the women, and this is a gender-sensitive social protection that is targeting the empowerment of women. Also, it is a very young program. If you find that the second and third columns are children under 18 for the second one, and then from 18 to 35, so it's a very young program. So also it's child sensitive. This one, khalas. Then we have a disability reform in the country because the disability certificates used to be faked, having benefits going to people that saying that they are disabled, and then actually they are not. We tightened the governance system only to reach the people with disabilities. And this is the pension. We increased the value of the contributory pension by 72%. And minimum, we automated the whole system. So it's actually a full reform of the pension and the social insurance, although it's not yet enough. This is a long way to go, because actually it's actually the repercussions of so many years. So you cannot have the reform all of a sudden happened in one day. We have gas connections added to, because as I said, it's integrated social protection. We have also decent housing. Then we started Forza program. Forza is opportunity, and it's a program that targets employment and having microfinance for people to get graduated, especially takaful or solidarity, to get be a household who are eligible and at the working age to get out of social protection. And then I'll finalize by Egypt's position towards universal social protection. Actually, in the call for action, they have 5 main actions, which we already started. The first one is to have protection throughout life cycle, starting from children up till the pension. And then universal coverage, provide combination of universal, like health coverage, but it's also targeted if it is cash transfer. National ownership, it's actually having social protection floor and for a fiscal space. And we're also developing a social protection strategy in collaboration with UNICEF, ILO, and the World Bank. Sustainable and equitable financing, now it's fully covered. It started by a loan from the World Bank, but it's now fully covered by the government budget. And finally, we have a participation and social dialogue. And I think the social dialogue, we established social protection committees at the level of the villages to help us in community targeting, and also to help identify the gaps that are there in the villages, to see exactly how much we can do, not only for the household, but for the villages, because this is the structure that is serving the household at the end. The fiscal space we're creating, we're away from lobbying for aid and transfers, because during the previous years, we're a bit tight in having loans from the World Bank. So Egypt took a position to stop or to minimize having loans, and to see what we can do in order not to have future other problems. So also we're aware of using fiscal and foreign exchange reserves, but we're mainly speaking about expanding social protection coverage, cleaning up and tightening the governance system to minimize the corruption measures in misusing the public resources, increasing tax revenues, especially on the luxurious products, actually also adopting a more accommodative macroeconomic framework and eliminating illicit flows. So thank you for the time, and open to any question.
Thank you very much, Ms. El-Kabbaj, because I think you have really articulated the importance of an integrated approach, looking at social protection across the life cycle with a mix of social insurance measures, social assistance measures, the need to look at equitable, progressive taxation, the need also to look to the link of employment, access to work and decent work. And I think it's also very interesting that you explained how Egypt had received support initially from the World Bank, but in the end had managed to actually fully fund this domestically. So I think that this is a very good segue now to Jürgen Ohman. I think it would be very interesting to discuss the role of development partners in catalyzing financing for social protection. We know that the European Commission has been supporting some countries extend their social protection systems, and you've been doing this through providing direct financial assistance to their social protection budgets. So can you explain a little bit more what this budget support is and how it works?
Yes, I'd like to. But I'd like to start with the question of at what stage in the policy process and design and implementation of social protection systems the financing question arises. And it's definitely not the first step. So at national level, there is first and foremost a question to be asked with as many as stakeholders possible to decide on the liabilities that a country and the decision makers in the country like to take over. So we need to define, or at national level it will be defined if this is more shelter, livelihoods, food security, nutrition, pension, income security. That's the first question. So about the sectoral approach and social protection, what is the priority for the country? Because it can hardly be done all at the same time. The second very much related question to that is what kind of level the government will accept responsibility for. So what is the level of pension that is considered adequate for government employees and for the rest of the population? It's the same, it's different. We have to ask what kind of level of social protection floors, if social protection floors is considered the relevant concept, what I hope is for every country this, the basis. And liabilities go beyond the social protection system, the normal system. It also has to take into account adequacy in relation to responses to shocks and displacements, which again creates liabilities to be taken over by the government. So when these questions are answered consensuously, then the next question arises, and now we are, what is the subject of our session? Who's funding? How to fund that what the government has decided to take over. The development of risk financing strategies are often led by the Ministry of Finance. It was nice to hear in some of the contributions that Ministry of Finance are sitting in social policy decision-making bodies. And they are looking on strengthening the capacity for risk management and debt management. In other, often more fragile countries, these are donors taking over the responsibility for the financial resilience of a country. And very often it's a mix of both. Funding is more than financing resources. It has also a lot to do with technical assistance and capacity strengthening. And what financial mechanisms are available to fund the liabilities that the government likes to take over. So again, first and foremost, we have the national governments with a national budget, split it into sectoral budgets, but resources coming from tax revenue and other sources of revenue, national revenues that we heard about. The second is donor funding, ODA, but also lending, concessional lending. It's often and increasingly used for certain types of social protection coverage, market-based with insurance products provided for certain segments, and other sources of funding that are available. When I come to this point of budget support, we remain clearly within the government budget. And the government budget is crucial when we talk about government-led, government-owned social protection systems that we are all try to support. So the budget support mechanism is it's just an aid modality. It's an aid modality like as program approaches, but an aid modality which directly feeds money into the government budget and that tries to support the objectives to be reached by quite different mechanism. The mechanism is not implementing technical assistance, have a project cycle management and a project which contributes to a certain outcome. It is in a dialogue with the government to decide on the targets to be reached. And that is very much close to public finance management. Even so, it might be budget support and social protection. The first is public finance management, and social protection as a sector comes in performance criteria to say more coverage, more adequacy, what kind of performance criteria the government and the European Commissions try to negotiate and negotiates in such a budget support contract. Budget support is today about 30% of the European Commission's ODA, which is around 10 billion euro a year, which is used for that. In social protection, we are not good. We are not good in financing programming. We have 1% in financing and programming, and just 1.5% when it comes to budget support. And therefore, we decided this is an area which needs more investment and which needs more attention from the development cooperation and from the partners. 3 types of budget contracts are available, so-called SDG budgets. SDG budget support contracts are contracts which help governments to implement their development policy. Sectoral budget supports for certain sectors. But once again, it doesn't mean that the money goes into the social protection budget. It goes in the general budget. But the performance criteria are just for the area of social protection. And the third one are state and resilient building contracts, which are more eligible for fragile states. The budget support is giving money allocation into the national budget. It delivers, in addition, as a mandatory part of it, technical assistance. You will never find a budget support contract which is without technical assistance, and sometimes it's even substantial and goes beyond 50% of the budget support. The advantage of that instrument is that this is giving the responsibility clearly to the national governments. It is to decide jointly on this performance criteria and to use widely used instruments like PEFA, Public Finance Assessment Instrument, used by the World Bank, the EU, UK, France, and others which are contributing to that and using it. And at the end, it helps to work more across sectors, strengthen implementation at national level and at subnational level, and to improve cross-sectoral monitoring. Very often it's not clear in budget support or it's not clear in social protection budgeting what is the budget for social protection, because it comes from so many different sources. Some of them are out budget in social protection funds, and social investments are often not clearly and transparently done in the budgetary process. To come to an end, that what budget support does and has as an objective is that what exactly we expect from the international community. To support country in multi-sectoral policy making to help them to make effective allocations in social protection at an adequacy level, to help to promote access to social services, and to make social protection in a way to make it towards universality. That is why we have a new social protection program which is specifically dedicated to budget support and the relation to public finance management. It will be jointly implemented by the ILO, by UNICEF, and the Global Coalition of Social Protection Floors. And it is our contribution to USP 2030. With budget support, we also acknowledge that change will take time. Universal social protection will not be developed and achieved within a 3-4 years period. So budget support gives a predictability for the country to have sufficient resources to pay for the liabilities and to slowly and gradually increase them towards the common goal, the USP 2030.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, for these considerations, and in particular, the need for providing predictable financing for comprehensive systems, not just small-scale development projects. And also, it's very interesting that you've decided to partner with civil society organizations in the implementation of this support as well. I would like to turn now to Plamen Dimitrov. First of all, I would like to ask you, in your role as a social partner, having been involved in the debates around the social security reforms in Bulgaria, but also in your role as a spokesperson for the workers' group on social protection in the ILO governing body, what do you see as key priorities for unions in the financing debate in Bulgaria, but also more widely?
Yeah, thank you very much, Evelyn, and good afternoon, everyone. I will start with a very short message, which is actually confirmed many times during the day. And I think it's very important to say this again, that financing and ensuring financing for universal social protection is a matter of political will. Affordability question that in the past engaged the social partners in a national level. How can you manage the system? We are not rich enough. How to construct the social protection, social insurance, social assistance part of the system, and which risk to cover, and what is the main goal to start with. Of course, this is a debate, as was mentioned by the previous speakers, very important, but the main point for me and for us as workers is that this is possible, it's achievable. So the question mark, how to extend the existing coverage, which would be very modest, one risk cover or two, following the 102 convention risks and areas, or which are the new risks to be covered in a consecutive way and gradually to move to the universal social protection, or how to improve the quality of protection in terms of financing of different risk and benefits. So this is the national debate, of course, but it is political choice, as I said. And saying that, I think it's very important to start from the national level discussion and to see, in the case of Egypt, this is the possibility to shift one income to the other. But I think the traditional discussion, at least in my region, was, and it still is, in terms of spending, expenditure, and political priorities, is a social security, social safety, and the military spendings. This is our case. I don't know what is established in different parts of the region. Actually, I know, but not in all of the regions. But I think it's especially in middle income countries, it is one of the key issues, especially in the EU, in other groupings. That is a crucial one: how to relocate spending and money from one area to the other, and societal choice on top of that. So, in a global report on future of work just released a few weeks ago, there are clear call, and I think everybody could subscribe there, that we call for guaranteed universal social protection from birth to old age, having in mind all the challenges that this report describes in front of us, not only digital, but also the need for new social contract, delivering new social contract in the globe. And that's a human-centered agenda that is described there, is bring us again to the discussion today that we're having here, social protection and universal social protection as not only as a right, as a human rights, but as a must of the all governments, employers, and workers in international, regional, and national level. And having said that, I would like to reiterate that some people said, okay, despite of this togetherness, let's say like that, the responsibility of the design, building, and financing of the social protection system at national level belongs to the governments, mainly to the governments. Of course, starting with the social protection floors, having this recommendation to now in our hands and very useful tool and complemented by the contributory schemes, mainly financed by the employers. This is their one responsibilities in all form of work. So we have to extend this, and this is the report set, not only me, that I mentioned just now. And I think it's very crucially important to cover all precarious form of work, not only the new one, not only the digital platform or the other guys. So the attempt to shift the burden towards the workers in terms of social security contribution coming to the contributory part, I think should be stopped and should be reversed back to the right way, and the responsibility of employers should be restored. And in this respect, in this line, the system that we're having in different countries usually have, as I said, social protection floors or kind of minimum floors. Maybe not call it like that, but minimum standards like that. Then I have the contributory system, varied country to country, and then I have voluntary. And I would like to underline our understanding from workers' side that the individual savings, individual money should be only kind of addition. It shouldn't be part and equal footing on a system, because as you know, this is not the case that many people could afford this to do in a consistent way and to fund and to cover the substantive part of the expenditure of social protection. So state and employer. Then the new reality said, who is employer? And then I will go to the old issue, the very old issue, but in a new dress. What is the employment and what is the scope of employment relationships, and who is a worker? Who should be covered and who should be paid for from the state and from the employer for the specific risks. 9 risks according to 102 in the full universal social protection, 102 in the full universal social protection issue. So I would like to underline again that even if you speak about the informal economy, if involved in this as a worker spokesperson on this issue, very useful tool. I have to use it, of course, in national and regional level. But I have to remind that, in fact, the informal workers are working for the big multinationals to a supply chains, which end up in informality somewhere. So, in fact, there are someone that should be made responsible for the social security and social protection in general for those workers. Of course, I know that it's not social justice that we are claiming here in this house in a centenary year. Of course, we have to stick to this justice, and people want to show them day after another that It is true. It's not on a fake message that we are delivering only in the conferences. So in terms of social protection, affordability, as I said, and fairness of funding, there are choices to be made at national level. But in terms of their benchmarks, I believe that have to be developed. Colleagues from Senegal just mentioned that the global average is around 9% of the global GDP. But there are also some regional indicators that should be developed, I believe, and common economic and social indicators, according to the regional development, should be a kind of precondition, platform to discuss and to be agreed for a minimum level of social protection expenditure within the same region. For example, European Union spending social protection in general, including healthcare, all the 9 risks covered. Starting from France, 34% of the GDP of France, ending the lowest level, Romania, less than 15% of the GDP of Romania. My country is somewhere in between 80%. But the average is 28% of the GDP in the EU, but the minimum of these figures. But it is clear, and it can be proved as a target, it should be set clear in all these regional groupings to say, look, the reasonable minimum level of the social protection expenditure that you should look for is something like that. Why? Because the regional competitions and then the multinational misuse of that, coming to the government saying, okay, look, if you diminish the social security contribution for me, I will invest here, then in the regional level, in the regional context, this could be avoided or could be at least diminished. And this not be an incentive for investment that every government should be fight for, despite of that his agenda, to develop universal social protection will be harmful, from such a development. So the regional social protection targets and benchmark, I think, is very, very important. And then the people broadly discussed today when the money would come from. Of course, Sharon Burrow mentioned from the very beginning, very synthetic, let's say, an integrated figure. 0.23% of global GDP is less than $200 billion US. Could make a big difference. SME could support us, could help us to achieve the social protection floors globally. It's only $200 billion US. Not so big amount of money in terms of the main kind. So this is affordable. This is could be delivered. Having in mind that the IMF said that up to 10% of the global GDP went to the tax haven. So it means $7.5 or $6 trillion annually. So it's a tremendous amount of money which we can target, make it transparent and accountable, and redirect, of course, for social protection. And the ILO report, it said very clearly, 2% of GDP for some countries, 6% for GDP of some other countries could make a big difference, and hundreds of countries could achieve social protection floors, not in 2 years. The previous speaker was right. But in some cases, some risks, we have to be very, very urgent, especially safety and health, because people died. So this risk should be targeted and prioritized immediately, tomorrow, today, yesterday. So this is my understanding about the way of financing. And looking at new sources. Of course, there are financial transaction tax, there are natural resources extraction taxes. It's happening, of course. In my country, the whole money from the privatization, concession, natural natural resources taxes, goes to the so-called Silver Fund, because we have a demographic problem. Africa, the developing world, not so big trouble on that. But my country is in a very big trouble in terms of demography, third best in the world. So this money filled this Silver Fund in terms of dealing with the demography and to feed the social protection, mainly pension system, when it's come to the needs. This is different way of inventing the sources and and financial mechanisms and instruments, but it's when political will is there, as I started, we'll end up with that. Then there are progressive taxes, of course, will be another tool. And of course, not to forget the role of IMF and World Bank, my favorite friends, with brackets or without brackets, as you call it, as you want it. So I am regularly engaged in the ITUC mission in Washington, D.C., and a regular meeting with the IMF and World Bank headquarters, discussing many issues, among them social protection, but also the issues about the conditionalities. And we are, within the last 20 years, are discussing this issue. There are change. I should admit this, especially in the World Bank program. There are some clear change, but not in IMF enough. IMF is still pressing Latin American countries to make a cut, especially in austerity measures during the crisis. Argentina, I'm looking at Guillermo here, but not only Argentina. AU, Troika with IMF, of course, we know what that did. So I think, I still expect this, new strategic framework on IMF engagement on social protection. They promised last year that should be released this year, so we really hope that there will see clear change for togetherness, for commitment that all institutions, OILO, IMF, World Bank, national governments, social partners, to go and to find a sustainable and equitable financing for universal social protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Plamen. You've touched on a large range of different topics that I think are food for thought. Looking at how, at national level, Bulgaria is facing big financing challenges and leveraging new sources of revenue to compensate, for example, with the Silver Fund. But also big considerations in terms of regional coordination on social protection, taking social protection financing out of the considerations for competitiveness between countries, and also the link to the broader international debate around the future of work, and the role also of international financing institutions. Now, we started late. We're supposed to end at 5:15, but since we had to start late, I think we should take 2 questions from the room quickly before closing. So I'm looking around to see if anyone has some remarks. I'll take this gentleman there and then Guillermo there.
Okay, thank you. I'm Barry Herman. I'm from the, what's relevant is I'm from the Global Coalition on Social Protection Floors. I want to underline the statement just made by Mr. Dimitrov and suggest that somebody was missing from the panel, which would be somebody from the IMF. We have Mr. Rutkowski from the bank. I don't know if there's anybody on the floor, from the IMF, but we are facing, the discussions, sorry? I didn't hear what he said. The discussion needs to be in the context of a volatile world. You know, it's not if there's going to be another financial crisis, but when. If there'll be another hurricane, but when. And the question is, how do you protect expenditures on social protection? As we saw in some countries like Greece, when the choice had to be made, do you pay the creditors or do you pay the pensioners? The creditors got paid. So, and indeed, the IMF is in the process of developing a new institutional view on the IMF and social protection. And it would have been interesting to have somebody from the IMF, even if they would be criticized. I mean, you know, they're adults. But thank you for raising that point. And I suppose the question is, in Senegal and in Egypt, are you ready for the next crisis? Thank you.
I will take the 2 questions together, and then I'll give the panel for a last round of remarks. Guillermo.
Gracias. Voy a hablar en español. Yo no quiero llevar mucho tiempo para compartir con ustedes una reflexión, simplemente. No creo que haga falta discutir lo que ha arribado el consenso internacional recientemente en esta misma casa a través de la adopción de la Recomendación 202 con los pisos nacionales de protección social, que no solamente alcanzan a la extensión de la protección social, sino que también ratifican el convenio 102, que de alguna manera pone en responsabilidad de los estados la seguridad social. Pero sí, me parece que, por lo menos, y lo digo con todo respeto, se escucha en la sala, a través de los testimonios de las distintas intervenciones, alguna cuestión que por lo menos a mí me suena bastante esquizofrénica, que es, por un lado, hablar de una extensión de la cobertura legal. Todos los países hablan de una extensión casi universal de la cobertura legal, pero lo cierto es que en la apertura de estas sesiones del día de hoy asistimos a que el 70% de la población mundial tiene o déficit o falta de cobertura. Entonces ahí tenemos un claro problema. Me parece que hay algo ahí que no está resuelto. Y me parece que desde el punto de vista de los trabajadores yo quiero establecer alguna preocupación que tenemos, sobre todo en países en vías de desarrollo. Estamos asistiendo a que sistemáticamente los gobiernos nos dicen que hay que ceñirse a programas de austeridad fiscal. No voy a sumarme al grupo de los amigos del Fondo Monetario Internacional, pero sí es cierto que en todos los programas se propicia la austeridad fiscal como un fin en sí mismo, por lo cual uno tiende a pensar que lejos de expandir la protección social, que es el gasto, tendríamos reducción de ese propio gasto. Pero cuando pensamos en la componente contributiva, también nos encontramos que ahí tenemos un déficit de la mano de la merma del trabajo decente, porque cuando vamos a ver la calidad del empleo que se nos ofrece, y no solamente tenemos que ir al futuro del trabajo, donde tenemos la automatización o la economía de plataformas y algunas nuevas formas de contratación, sino el trabajo clásico, la relación laboral clásica también está deteriorada justamente porque las políticas de ajuste recomiendan una contracción salarial. Entonces tenemos una doble vía de ajuste sobre los sistemas de financiación de la protección social. Entonces esto es simplemente, y lo quiero mencionar así, es un problema que no tiene solución si lo planteamos de esta manera. Si verdaderamente el consenso internacional y la Agenda 2030 propone expandir y extender los modelos de protección social de modo universal, tenemos que pensar que
that we are extending this, but we need to have a way of finding it, because the way of financing for that extension requires political will. And so this means that we have to review and revise the global economic system and the production within our countries, because that is really the only way that we can actually resolve this. We can't just have policies on rights, which are very good. Yes, we've got a lot of that, and it's all agreed already through these global commissions and so on. We have these international standards, but what we lack in complement to this is to actually open the doors knock on the doors of Davos, for instance, and say that they need to find new solutions, new means of production, of spreading the wealth, because in the medium and long term, we are not going to find solutions that actually work for social protection coverage. Thank you.
So I'm going to give a very quick possibility for the panelists to respond. We're going to call this a lightning round, maximum 1 minute per respondent. And I would like to invite you, Madame Diaco, to go first.
Merci beaucoup. Je rebonde pratiquement.
Thank you. Yes, along the same lines as what we heard from Mr. Plamen Dimitrov. First of all, we need to have that political will. If we haven't got political will, if we haven't got commitment and engagement by the presidents of our republics, then I don't think we're going to make any progress on this in terms of social protection. We really need our states to put this foremost. We need organization of this. I've heard since this morning people talking about strategies for social protection. Firstly, we need a national strategy for social protection. For instance, in Senegal, we have updated our national social protection strategy, and currently this is a life cycle approach. We need good social protection, and this means leaving no one behind from birth right through to old age. We need to provide adequate financing at each level throughout the life cycle to all parts of the population. Now, of course, you're going to say, yes, we need more donors, we need more technical support. Yes, we've made efforts on this, and ever since independence, we have been trying to achieve this through technical and finance partners, but we do need good organization and political will to actually make progress on this. We also need to ensure that we have good organization within the social protection area itself, first of all, with a single national register. This register will enable the country to have a coordination tool, and without that coordination tool, we really are going to be very distracted in the way that we work. We won't be able to have such a positive impact on our targets. And of course, the target groups that we focus on particularly are the poorest and disadvantaged families. We need to ensure that our actions can be carried out not only now, but in the medium and long term. We need to ensure that we avoid new governments coming in and changing everything or not continuing with these programs. So we need to have the program being a long-term one and not just from the current government. And this is something that we need to ensure that social protection continues. Thank you.
Regarding the readiness of the country towards the coming period and the potential challenges, I'll just speak about 3-4 challenges, just naming them, and how the country is becoming ready. The readiness is there, whether the country is really will succeed to pass these challenges. I don't think it's an easy exercise, but I think at the end of the day, it should be mission possible, though not necessarily perfect, but possible. We have a big problem of overpopulation in the country, and the illiteracy rate amongst the poor is high. So I think this is one of the major challenges. And having the unemployment or rate among the poor, since they are illiterate, they're also financially illiterate. So helping them to get out of the vicious circle of poverty towards economic empowerment and graduating from social protection to production, it might take some time to get them prepared so as not to return back again to poverty. I think also this supporting the basic services, whether education, health. Yes, we're creating the demand, but the supply is not that much great and that much of a quality. So I think it needs also improving the services that we're pushing people to use. Limited capacities of the civil servants and the resistance to change. Civil servants were not used to automation, to having tight governance system, fighting corruptions, and so on. So as for the pluses or the opportunities and strong points that we're having, is establishing a social justice committee. It's a ministerial committee for social justice, including 14 ministers to harmonize policies together and to agree on the allocation of budget, especially to social protection interventions, not only to cash transfers, to health insurance, to insurance and support for the farmers, for fishermen, for all the vulnerable groups and So I think this Social Justice Committee, it's good that at the end of the day, we had that discourse at the policy level. We didn't see it before. So it's good that it started to get at the policy level and the allocation of budgets. The budget allocated for only the cash transfers, it's nearly tripled from around 6 billion Egyptian pounds a year. It tripled to 18.5 a year. Also investment in the human capital, I think the Ministry of Finance, if we speak about the cost without the benefit, it's hard to sell the cause. So I think we need to sell the cause right and to invest in human capital, social protection. It doesn't mean to get the people independent, but to have it from a developmental point of view and helping them to get out with more of health, education, nutrition. I think if we see that these indicators are really improving, the countries will buy the cause of even investing in social protection. But I think having social protection as a burden, I think the countries will not be that much ready to support them. Also, I think networking with the NGOs, because the NGOs are supporting social protection in a way or another. So what we're doing is that we're having a unified database, not only for the government partners, but for NGOs to ensure that people are not having duplicate benefits from everybody. So I think the beneficiaries that are not eligible, and we see them that they are above the poverty line, we send them to the NGOs to support. So I think working together is very important. Having the private sector with us in terms of vocational training and availing job opportunities is very much needed. Technical expertise from the international organizations, especially in the capacity building and in selling the cause, would be very much appreciated because I think the good practices, especially for the countries of Latin America, Asia, and certain countries in Africa, were much of a support for us to start with where they ended. So we did not start from scratch. And finally, I think now, after we're having automated systems and having electronic linkages at the horizontal level or at the between us and other ministries at the vertical level, helped us more to fight corruption and to have more of a transparent and accountability mechanisms. So I hope it succeeds.
Plamen and Jürgen, being very mindful of time, do you have one major remark that you would like to express rapidly before we close the panel? Plamen, over to you.
Only one main issue, I think. The the business case, some people said the business case of social protection. The link between the social protection spendings and economic development. It's a huge issue, of course. I'm not going to discuss this now, but I'm not so in this side that the people said this morning that they are poorly documented, this link between the spendings in social protection and the boosting aggregate demands, and through that contributing to the GDP growth in many countries. So in this line, okay, maybe in OECD studies we can find some more details on that, but also we need more studies, I would say, just to manifestate this very, for my understanding, clearly documented links, and of course to go even further. And the last point, global report on the future of work again, questioning measuring economic development only through GDP. They said GDP and beyond, and distributional and equity ability or dimension of the economic growth to be put under question and to be evaluated much more in deep. So I think that we have to come back to this issue again, and the link between social protection, financing, expenditure, and then economic development should be much more broader discussed. Thank you.
Jürgen.
To the first question, yes, we share your desire to have IMF here in the room, to have IMF as part of the initiative. We in the European Commission also thought about including the IMF in our new global program, but the IMF, we don't know yet what to expect in social protection. They have not committed to USB 2030, so even so they have now a social protection strategy. To the second question, you raise the issue of the perception of social protection as current expenditure, consumption expenditure, which cannot withstand austerity and other measures which are imposed on the countries. That is exactly the view on social protection that we'd like to change. It's exactly that what we are looking for, to generate evidence that there's a positive return in investment in social protection, in poverty reduction, human development, peace, inclusive economic growth, and resilience and equalities. So we have, in continuation of this conference, the next one on universal child grant, and I hope that you will be here, because I expect from the research that we get evidence on that the investment is worth, and we have the whole week to wait for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, and to all of the panelists here and to all of you in the room for this very stimulating, productive discussion. There were a lot of very diverse remarks, country cases that were presented. I'm not going to summarize them given the time considerations, but I would like to end with one remark that came very clearly out of this panel and came also very clearly out of the discussions earlier today, and that is the point around political will. So social protection is not just a luxury for good economic times. It is achievable, it is affordable, and in fact, it's not just it's a consumption expenditure, but it is an investment and a precondition for economic growth. So I would like to close the panel here. We will go straight to the concluding panel now. Thank you.